So first, we don't want to use any lights. When you start lighting a scene, especially an interior, we're going to be using indirect illumination. So I'm going to delete all the lights. I know that um, you guys tried to put some lights in the scene, like you know, starting with spotlights and putting a lot of lights can be confusing. So I'll explain a specific workflow. I'm going to turn off the frame gate and the resolution gate and press 5 so I can see everything with no shade. Um, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the background image. We are going to use a background image, um, and I'm going to create a ceiling. I don't know why it's very slow for some reason. It's probably because of the QuickTime. So I'm just going to duplicate the floor and move it up. And bring this here. The computer is really slow for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Okay. We only have the window as our open area. Okay, as long as this is sealed, I can go inside the room. Press that. Okay. So now I'm gonna look at the materials for a second, and then I'm gonna press 6, and so this one, the floor, for instance, I'm gonna press Control A to go to the attribute editor, and all the way to the right, usually that's the material. So this is a blend, that's fine, and what we want to avoid is extremely high reflectivity. So we can actually, you know, this is fine as a reflectivity. What I noticed was the tabletop is very reflective, so we're gonna avoid like some of those things. I mean, the specular roll off, I can tone it down a little bit. The same with the tabletop. There is a way to create a glass that is more a realistic glass, that is like a glass top. But this one, what I want you guys to avoid is incandescence. That will kill your scene. Incandescence and ambient, like you know, this is going to first of all kill the color and the texture, and it creates a self-illuminating object which we don't really want. So no incandescence unless there is a workflow for that, and I will explain. And this is like a very high gloss. I would say maybe what we could do, I could use a different material. I can say assign a new material and go to the mental ray, and I'm going to use a preset MI material X. I can use a preset for like a thick glass. That's it. And then if I go to the MI material X, I'm going to say table top. Maybe I'm just going to name it glass. You want to make sure when you pass all the projects to me that all the materials are named. So it's not like Lambert 1, Lambert 3, Lambert 37. So tabletop glass preset. There's a preset here. I can go to the glass thick and replace that. So I can actually use that as a preset. Now I'm going to go and look at some other materials. Again, this one here that's fine. Actually, this is a good color, and that's specular shading, reflectivity, doesn't have any reflection. So that's good. This one here. So when you go to create all these, you just want to go down to the specular shading and see how reflective is this object. If this is a ceramic, maybe we can make it less reflective. We also want to make, if it's a ceramic, maybe we want to make it more of a blurry reflection. How do we do that? So I do see the specular highlight. I think it's a little bit too intense. I'm going to take it, I'm going to tone it down again a little bit. So like, I mean, it's going to be like something like this. And then I can go, especially when you're using a Fong, and this is going to be a ceramic, name everything, cup. That's it. Now you can go to the mental ray and introduce reflection blur. So because we're using mental ray, we can use, whenever you're using Maya materials, Blinn, Lambert, Fong, surface shaders, all those are Maya materials. So they need to be introduced to like a blur that is like, you have to tweak the blur manually. So you have to go down and introduce reflection blur. So if you do that, let's say reflection blur 1, don't worry about the rays. We don't need to increase anything yet because it's going to increase our render time, so we want to do some tests. So then you do that for any Maya material. For any mental ray material, let's say I'm going to select this piece, and I'm going to separate that actually, mesh, separate. And I'm going to select that, that over here. I think this had a material, right? Lambert 4. It's missing, so I'm just going to do something else with it. So I'm going to create a new material. So see, if I go to the mental ray materials and I use the MI material X, then I can go, let's say, lampshade. Then I can go to the color. You know, I'm going to make some sort of color here. And go to the presets. Actually, if I do the preset, it's going to eliminate the color. I can bring it back. So I can go and say maybe like a glossy plastic, replace, and I'm gonna create a different color for that. And see, now there's like this is a preset, but I can tweak the preset. If you see here, we have reflectivity. I'm gonna take the reflectivity down because it was a glossy piece. In this case, for an MIA material X, which is like a Swiss knife of a mental ray material, you can do anything with it. It has the reflectivity, but it also has the glossiness here, and you can see that I can make it very high gloss, or very like more toned down. So that means that if I tone it down, it will be more blurry on the reflections. Automatically, the mental ray material is smarter to like adjust the reflections. If you don't use for the previous one, we had to blur the reflections manually. So this is kind of something to think about. Now the glossy samples, we need to increase that, but later. So I'm gonna move back and frame the scene, and as I go, if I see something that needs to be toned down or some material that needs to be adjusted, I'm gonna do it after I see the first render pass. So I'm gonna turn on the render, and then the first thing we need to do is go to the render settings. I know this is Maya 2016, but I'm going to use similar settings for that we use. I'm going to use the legacy settings. So I'm going to go to the render options and kill the default light, so everything should turn black. The quality should remain 0.25. There's no indirect lighting yet, so I should be okay to start a render. But also, let's look at the image size. So we want an image size of HD 1080. So that would be our final image. I'm going to close this. I'm going to save the scene. Now I'm going to be saving the scene because it is going to start getting heavier with the render and might crash. So I have to, like, make sure you save it. And now I'm going to go ahead and open this render view and just go to my options and use like maybe a 25% and get started with like a first frame. So we render and nothing is there, but notice something. If it should be all dark right now, and we see that it's not. So I'm going to go to the wall and Incandescents need to be no incandescence and no ambient, nowhere. So anything you see, if it's completely dark and you still see stuff, that means that they're self-illuminating objects. Those objects will kill your light. So so we have to like eliminate any possible incandescence. So this has a lot of incandescence, a lot of ambient color. We don't want any transparency on that right now. And um, I'm going to move this just because I want I'm going to move it here for a second. So I want the light to kind of go through the window. And this is Lambert. Make it a little bit lighter. Okay, so now this should be fine. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to my bookmark. Actually, I'm gonna create a new bookmark. I'm gonna frame my scene. And before I do anything, I'm gonna select this piece, maybe also all this gear. And throw just a chrome. So I'm going to go assign new material and go to the mental array materials, go to the MIA material X and name that chrome, and go into the presets and replace it with a chrome material. That's good. So now I'm going to go and set a bookmark, something like that, and create a bookmark. Save the scene and render. So I want to prepare the scene, so make sure that don't use any incandescence, don't use any ambient, unless we'll see where the ambient goes. Maybe when you have like maybe a lemon or like some fruit that kind of like is very bright, and we're gonna use a little bit of ambient color. So now the only thing I see is the frames. So the frames again probably need to be it's a material that needs to be also assessed. So that no incandescence, no ambient, white. Now this should be, this is a very intense roll-off. So roll-off. Maybe we can do that a little bit more concentrated. And the reflectivity for those, I mean, those are like frames, wooden frames or metal frames. Let's say we can just drop it down to half. And now let's go and render again. Once you get complete darkness, if something is like, something is glowing in the dark, you have to go and find it and see what it is. And this is, now in this case, maybe that one, maybe you want to have some ambient color. That's fine. Let's leave it. So now I'm going to start setting the lights. I'm going to just stop the video here.